Welcome to video 2. So this second tutorial is going to be how to prepare your image for the web using Photoshop. And I did promise kind of a few cool effects. So on the screen right now I have a finished image with some effects that I've done. So I'm going to show you a few different tricks and tips to prepare your image using this kind of technique, okay? So the goal here was to kind of make it look distressed and old, to play on that memory concept that we had going on in the blog. So let's go ahead and turn all of this off, and I'm going to show you what I did. So if you go down to your layer, which I know my webcam is actually over right now, if you right click on that, you can click duplicate layer. Now this is on the background layer specifically. And then click OK, and I will turn that back on so you can actually see the layer. So here's the first thing we're going to do with this image, and I do this with all of my images for the web. Specifically products, because when you're taking product photography, things can turn out really dark, even if you're using a white box, and it can be really frustrating. So if you go into Image and Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast, the main thing is to bring up your brightness. You can adjust the contrast if you want to, or if you don't. I really like it there around the 60 level, and to bring the contrast in this particular image around 40. The purpose of that is just to bring up the cerulean color and to bring up the color of the trees in the background, which you're not going to see in the final image for this particular tutorial, but you could just take the image as is, just like this, and put it on the web. And just click OK, and that sets that in. Now I'm going to go down again and duplicate this layer and click OK. Because if you did something that you wanted to undo, duplicating that layer makes it a lot easier than having to start all the way over after all those changes. And it also allows you to take the time to turn off some of those changes so that you can see what the original photo looked like. So it's a big difference. As to what we did. Alright, so on this layer, what I'm going to do is actually, I want to show you how to use the magic wand tool a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do here is actually bump up my tolerance to 30, and then we're going to go back down to the image, and I want to start kind of selecting this boat. And then if I hold the Shift key down, you can see that plus symbol will allow me to keep adding to my selection. If you don't have that down, you're not going to be able to add to your selection. Now this is where it gets a little tricky because the tolerance can get too high, especially with those lighter shadows. So I'm going to hit Ctrl-Z, and I'm going to come up and bring my tolerance down to 10 and go back and start adding again. I want to make sure that all of my walking ants, as they are called, are all the way around these guys here in their shadow. Alright, now I'm going to select and invert, and then I'm also going to rasterize this particular layer so that I can delete all of that background. So if I turn off this other image, both of them, you can see that all that's left here are just those guys on the boat, okay, and their shadow. And then if I turn that back on, you don't really notice a difference yet. So here's where things are going to start to change. So the first thing I want to do is actually come up here to Filters and Noise, and I want to add some noise to this image. So what I ended up doing was the Gaussian at 7.26% for this particular image. Now you can play around with this, whether you want it to be uniform or Gaussian, which is kind of more sporadic, and just hit OK. It can also be monochromatic or not. I kind of prefer the monochromatic as far as making it look a little older, because it looks like, you know, some of the film has come up. And then if I bring this back, you can see that this is a little more sharp compared to the rest of the image, and doesn't have all of this noise on top of that. So it allows that to kind of pop a little more to bring out that image. Alright, so one more thing I want to do. I'm going to turn that back off, and I want to go over to Image and Adjustments, and I want to go to Color Balance. So the purpose here is to play around with these levels to make it look a little older, And I don't remember what I did exactly, so I'm just going to kind of play with this again, and you can see what it'll look like. Sorry about that. Alright, nope, we're going to go more towards maybe just a little bit of green, and bring up that yellow, maybe a little more red. Okay, and I think that looks good as far as making it look a little older. And you can still bring back those guys on the boat with the gray. You can also just leave them off if you wanted it to look just like this, but I like that focus on there. I think it kind of is cool. And then, let me see here. Oh, there was one more thing I added, which was my tag for my business, which kind of show, especially when you're posting about your article, you want to make sure that you're representing yourself. So I like that about there, which I think I maybe put a little higher before, but that's okay. You can move that around all you want. You know, I could put it up here if I wanted to. And depending on your tag, it may be able to just sit right there. But I like mine kind of attached to the edge. And we're gonna select all, deselect layers. There we go. So now you can see just kind of that final. So, I'm going to show you what it was before. So that's what it was before, and this is what it is after. Okay, and if you just decide, you know, all you want is that brightness and contrast, you can go back and just turn all that off and have the brightness and contrast. You can still make it look a little older by keeping the color balance or adding back in that noise. So there's just little bit of things that you can do to prepare this image for the web. So the final thing you need to do is save it. And the cool thing about Photoshop is that it offers a compressed image. And what that means is that it makes it a little smaller for the web, which I really like. As far as loading times, it just goes a lot faster, and sometimes the images will end up being too big if you don't compress them. So we'll go to File, Save As. Oh, in here, let me show you where I did that. File, Export, actually, Save for Web. And then we just wait for it to load, and you can kind of look around and see how clean and crisp it is. If it's what you want, you can put it on the screen. I always recommend making sure you go with PNG. You can or cannot do the transparency if you want. Interlace can do some crazy things sometimes. But that one seemed fine, and embedding the color profile can vary. So you are going to lose a little bit of your quality of image here when you're saving it for the web, because it is compressing that down to a much smaller, easier size. You also lose a little bit of, like, I had the a little bit of a shadow on this, which is now just making it look like it's got one big line around it. So I may go back and just turn that off. There we go. Sorry, my mouse froze on me. Alright, so we'll turn off the tag, and then we'll go to File, Export, Save for Web, Fit on Screen, and there you go. And that noise can look a little heavy here too. So if you wanted to, you could also turn that off. So it's always, you know, kind of like watch as you're going through here and make sure it looks really how you want it to. Fix it if it doesn't. Photoshop and any of the Adobe programs, anytime you're doing something, is always just kind of keep playing with it until it's exactly what you want it to be. The longer you go, the more you get used to exactly what settings you want, how you want it to look. So as soon as this loads, we can say Fit on Screen, and I like the look of that, so then you can say Save. And here you can choose what title you want. We'll say File, Photoshop. Alright, so that finishes off this video. If you're still interested in Canva, it's a great tool, and even though you can add text in Photoshop, perfectly doable. I recommend programs like Adobe Illustrator for that, actually, or just using Canva, which has a lot of really neat options. So thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you soon.